right, well, hello and welcome to Mystery Island. My name's Matt, and I'll be your Bible study teacher for this first lesson. And since it's the first lesson, first time together for the week, I think it's appropriate for us to introduce ourselves. So go ahead and let me know your name. All right, sounds good. Thanks. Well, nice to meet you. And we're going to play a little game really quick just to get you to know each other a little bit more. So the first thing I want you to do is, and how we're playing this game, the way this game goes, is I'm going to say a word or a phrase, talk about something, an item, and you're going to respond with the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about this thing. All right? Understand what's going on? So I'll say something, say a word, a thing, and you're going to respond with the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about this thing. So since we're on Mystery Island, we're going to talk about some island-related things. First thing, the beach. Nice, nice. I actually usually think about those things too. What about lizards? Yeah, nobody likes lizards. Gross, disgusting, slimy, scaly. Nobody likes lizards. The sun. Good word. Important. The sun is a highly important part of being able to, heat us as Earth and provide for us food and provide for plants and all those things. So sun's important. Pirates. Arr, I agree. Last, and maybe the most important one, God. Very good. Good thoughts about who God is. Now, some people say the most important thing that you think about, what is most important about who you are, is what you think about when you think about God. And our whole theme this week, our whole goal in VBS this year, is to think rightly about who God is. For us to not just think about God, but to think true thoughts about who God is. And the place that we go for true thoughts about God is His Word. Now, a lot of people have wrong thoughts about God, misconceptions about who God is. Some people think God is just like this really generous grandpa. And you go to grandpa and you ask for candy, or you ask for a treat, or you ask for a toy, and he's just constantly handing out treats whenever you want something. Other people think that God is like this angry judge who's watching all of the things that you're doing. And every time you do something wrong, he's just regularly ready to discipline you and to smack you over the hand and tell you that was wrong. And he's just always there to tell you how bad that you are. But what we want to see is what the Bible says about who God is. And every day we're going to turn to His Word and pick up a story and see what that story says to us about who God is. And this first story is in Acts chapter 17, verses 16 through 34. And in this passage, we meet a man by the name of Paul. And Paul is a believer in Jesus, a believer in God. And he's not just any believer. He's one of those types of believers who goes around from city to city and tells people about who God is and what God has done for us in Jesus Christ. And so he finds himself in the city of Athens in Acts chapter 17. Athens is in Greece. And in Greece, there were statues all around that Paul could see. And these statues are called idols. And they would build these statues to these beings or things that they would worship. And so Paul looks around and he sees all these statues, and he wants to tell them about the true God, the real God that they should worship, because they're worshiping all these false gods. And so he goes to the synagogue and he starts telling people in the synagogue about God, and then people in the community start hearing what he's saying about God, and they find it interesting, and they bring him to the center of the community that's called the Areopagus. And in the Areopagus, he begins to tell the people about who God really is. And that's where we pick up in verse 22. It says, Paul stood in the middle of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that you are extremely religious in every respect. For as I was passing through and observing the object of your worship, I even found an altar on which was inscribed, 'To an unknown God.' Therefore, what you worship in ignorance, this I proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it, He is Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in shrines made by hands. Neither is He served by human hands as though He needed anything, says he himself gives everyone life and breath and all things. From one man, he has made every nationality to live over the whole earth and has determined their appointed times and the boundaries of where they live. He did this so they might seek God and perhaps they might reach out and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Now, Paul says a lot of things in here, and he has to say this because these people are worshiping false gods, gods like Zeus. Zeus was the chief of all Greek gods, and his image was like a lightning bolt. And what they believed about Zeus is that when he got angry, he would hurl these lightning bolts to the earth and cause massive destruction. And then there was the god Nike. Now, a lot of you may have Nike shoes, and Nike was the goddess of victory. But this goddess of victory wanted to win so much, she often cheated and kind of found her way to victory in unjust and cruel ways. And finally, there was the Greek god Poseidon, who was the god of the sea. And he would sink ships and cause people to drown just on a whim, just because he was bored. Now, these gods don't seem like gods that are worthy of worship. They all have faults and misgivings. But one of the things that Paul wants to make sure he says to the people in Athens is that there is one and only one true God. And he makes it a point to say that this God is not served by man. He does not need adoration, and he does not need a statue made of him by human hands. Like, people don't need to build a statue of the true God. That he alone is always perfect. He alone is always true. He alone is always going to do the right thing. This God made from one person all things. I mean, he made everything that you see. And he appointed times for all people. And so Paul stands in front of all these people and says, look, there is a God. There is one true God. And all of these false gods that you're worshiping, they are not God. You know what happens in our lives? We may not set up statues of things. We may not build things of our hand that we bow down to. But what the Bible says is that we're all following after things that are not God. The Bible says we all place little idols in our hearts and we're pursuing these things to give us joy and to give us a sense of purpose. But the Bible says the only God who's worthy of our joy and worthy of our devotion, worthy of our praise, and worthy of every moment of our day is the God who reveals himself in his word. And over these next few days, I'm excited that we're going to be able to learn together more about who God is. And the first thing, and I think the thing that Paul depicts here, is that this God is great. He is a great God. And our verse for the day, your treasured verse for the day, it says this really clearly. It says in Psalm 145, verse 3, great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable. I want you to know something. Remember when at the beginning of this, I told you to shout out the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about God. And I also said that what you think about when you think about God is the most important thing about you. Here's another really exciting thing. You will never think a thought that is great enough, big enough to describe God. Like, isn't that amazing? That God is so big and so great that you have never and you will never have a big enough thought about who he is. He is grander than we can ever imagine. And there are not enough words or enough minutes in our lifetimes to express the greatness of this God. And he is explained himself and described himself in this word. And we look forward to finding out more about him this week. See you tomorrow.